The Deathworld Alliance Part 1. The Gathering Storm Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the EDS Valiant, watching the stars streak past as his ship dropped out of hyperspace. The massive fortress world of Grimhold Prime loomed ahead, its surface covered in weapons platforms and shield generators. Even from this distance, Jake could see the scars left by countless battles. This was the heart of the Deathworld Alliance, where only the strongest species in the galaxy dared to meet. "Captain, we're receiving priority transmission from Alliance." "Command," reported Lieutenant Sam Parker from the communications station. Her voice carried the hard edge that came from growing up on Scorched Haven, where the sun never set and water was worth more than gold. "Put it through, Sam." Jake straightened his uniform as the main screen flickered to life. Admiral Lisa Carter appeared on the display, her weathered face showing the stress lines that came with commanding Earth's forces in Alliance space. Behind her, Jake could see the bustling activity of the command center, with officers from dozens of different species working side by side. "Jake, we have a situation. How soon can you get down here?" Lisa's voice was tight with urgency. "We're docking." "Now, Admiral, what's going on?" "Something that makes our worst nightmares look like pleasant dreams. I'll brief you in person. Bring your senior staff." The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at the blank screen. In the 3 years since humanity had joined the Deathworld Alliance, he had never seen Lisa this shaken. The Alliance was made up of species from the galaxy's most dangerous planets. These were beings who had survived everything the universe could throw at them. If something had Lisa scared, it was serious. "Commander Sullivan, you're with me," Jake called to his first officer. Beth Sullivan looked up from her tactical display, her ice blue eyes reflecting years of combat experience. She had grown up on the mining colonies of Europa, where a single mistake could mean death in the frozen vacuum of space. "Tony, keep the ship ready for immediate departure," Jake ordered his chief engineer. Tony Rodriguez nodded, wiping grease from his hands. The young man had survived the volcanic death world of New Pompeii, where the ground could melt beneath your feet without warning. If anyone could keep the Valiant running under impossible conditions, it was Tony. "Amy, I want you there too," Jake said to the ship's xenobiologist. Dr. Amy Foster had seen things that would drive most people insane. During her time on Quarantine 7, where deadly plagues had wiped out entire cities, her knowledge of alien biology had saved countless lives. 20 minutes later, Jake and his team walked through the corridors of Grimhold Prime. The fortress was a maze of reinforced tunnels carved directly into the planet's rocky core. They passed groups of Alliance warriors heading to briefing rooms. Jake recognized the stone-like Stonebloods, whose thick hides could withstand crushing gravity. Nearby, a group of venom wraiths moved like liquid shadow. Their acidic bodies contained in environmental suits. The briefing room was packed with Alliance commanders. Jake saw faces he recognized from a dozen battles. These were survivors, fighters, who had earned their place through blood and determination. Yet every one of them looked worried. Admiral Lisa Carter stood at the front of the room beside a massive display screen. "Thank you all for coming. What I'm about to show you will change everything we thought we knew about threats to the Alliance." The screen came to life, showing deep space sensor readings. At first, Jake saw nothing unusual. Then the display zoomed in and his blood ran cold. A ship hung in the darkness of space, but calling it a ship seemed wrong. The thing was enormous, easily 50 kilometers long and 20 wide. Its hull looked organic, covered in what appeared to be living metal that shifted and pulsed like a heartbeat. Weapon ports that resembled giant eyes tracked across its surface, and smaller vessels moved around it like insects around a hive. "We're calling it the Harbinger," Lisa said. "It appeared at the edge of our space 3 days ago. We sent the usual patrol fleets to investigate." The display changed to show the remains of Alliance ships drifting in space. Jake counted at least 30 vessels, all of them torn apart with surgical precision. "The first patrol was destroyed in minutes," Lisa continued. "The second patrol included heavy cruisers and our best pilots. Same result. The third patrol was led by the Krillian hive mind's diplomatic corps. They tried to establish communication. Beth Sullivan leaned forward. What happened to them? Gone, vaporized, but that's not the worst part. Lisa's expression grew even. Grimmer, watch this. The screen showed battle footage from the failed encounters. Jake watched as Alliance weapons struck the Harbinger's hull. For a moment, it seemed like the attacks were working. Sections of the alien vessel's armor cracked and began bleeding a strange, glowing fluid. Then something impossible happened. The damaged areas began to change, adapting to resist the weapons that had hurt them. Within minutes, the same attacks that had caused damage were bouncing harmlessly off the hull. It learns, whispered Dr. Amy Foster. It adapts to every attack. That's exactly right, Lisa confirmed. Each battle makes it stronger. Our diversity, our different fighting styles and weapons, everything that makes the Alliance powerful, is being turned against us. A Stoneblood commander named Granite Crusher spoke up, his voice like grinding rocks. What does it want? We intercepted a transmission yesterday. Our best translators worked around the clock to decode it. Lisa touched. A control and alien sounds filled the room. After a moment, the computer provided a translation in flat, mechanical tones. Harvest protocol initiated. Resource assessment in progress. Integration will begin upon completion of analysis. The room fell silent. Jake felt ice forming in his stomach. It sees us as resources. Food. Or worse, Amy added quietly. It might want to absorb us, add our knowledge and abilities to its own. Lisa nodded. Long-range sensors show the Harbinger is moving toward our core systems. At its current speed, it will reach the first inhabited worlds in 6 days. Jake stood up. What's the plan? We're assembling every ship, every fighter, every weapon we have. The largest military force the Alliance has ever gathered. We're going to stop this thing before it reaches our worlds. And if we can't? Asked Beth. Lisa's expression was hard as stone. Then we buy time for evacuations and hope someone, somewhere, can find a way to kill it before it consumes everything we've built. The meeting broke up as commanders rushed to prepare their forces. Jake walked back to his ship with his team, each of them lost in thought. They had faced terrible enemies before, but this was different. This was a threat that grew stronger. With every battle, that learned from every mistake they made, as the Valiant undocked from Grimhold Prime, Jake stood on his bridge and watched the Alliance fleet assembling. Hundreds of ships from dozens of worlds, each one crewed by survivors of the galaxy's most dangerous environments. It was an impressive sight, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to face something beyond their understanding. Course. Laid in for the Nexus Point, Captain, reported Sam Parker. Take us out, Jake ordered. Behind them, Grimhold Prime grew smaller as they headed toward what might be the Alliance's final battle. In the depths of space, the Harbinger continued its steady approach toward the heart of civilized space, its organic hull pulsing with alien purpose. The Deathworld Alliance Part 2, First Contact Protocol the Nexus, Point System buzzed with activity as ships from across the Alliance arrived in waves. Jake Morrison had never seen so many vessels in one place. The combined fleet stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction, a metal constellation of humanity's most advanced warships alongside the exotic vessels of their alien allies. Fleet. Admiral Rex Harris commanded the armada from his flagship, the massive dreadnought Stormbreaker. The grizzled veteran had survived the hurricane world of New Hurricane, where winds could reach 500 kilometers per hour and lightning storms lasted for months. His voice crackled over the communication channels as he coordinated the largest military force the Alliance had ever assembled. All ships, this is Admiral Harris. We have 300 vessels ready for combat. Every species in the Alliance is represented here today. We're going to show this thing that the Deathworld Alliance doesn't back down from a fight. Jake stood on the bridge of the Valiant watching the tactical displays. His ship had been assigned to the second wave, supporting the heavy assault cruisers. That would lead the attack. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. Each person focused on their duties. Lieutenant Sam Parker monitored communication channels from her station. Her fingers danced across the controls as she coordinated with ships across the fleet. "Captain, I'm picking up chatter from the Venom Wraith squadrons. They're reporting unusual energy readings at the edge of the system." Commander Beth Sullivan looked up from her tactical console. "What kind of readings?" "Unknown energy signature, massive scale. It's like nothing in our databases." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Time until the Harbinger arrives?" "Based on our calculations, it should drop out of hyperspace in the next few minutes," replied Sergeant Kate Murphy from the weapons station. The tough woman from the nanite-ravaged world of steel. Haven had personally tested every weapon system on the ship. Dr. Amy Foster stood near the science station, her portable scanner in hand. "Captain, I'm detecting strange fluctuations in local space. It's almost like reality itself is being bent somehow." Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. The main display screen lit up with incoming signals from long-range sensors. "Contact!" shouted Sam. "Massive hyperspace emergence detected." Space itself seemed to tear open as the Harbinger dropped out of hyperspace. The alien vessel was even more terrifying in person than it had appeared in the sensor recordings. Its organic hull pulsed with veins of light that ran along its surface like blood vessels. The ship's skin appeared to be breathing, expanding and contracting in slow, rhythmic cycles. "All ships, this is Admiral Harris. Maintain formation and prepare for first contact protocols." Jake watched as a small shuttle launched from the Stormbreaker. The diplomatic vessel approached the Harbinger slowly, broadcasting standard greeting messages in dozens of languages. For several minutes, nothing happened. The massive alien ship hung motionless in space, its surface rippling with strange patterns of light. Then the Harbinger responded. Thousands of smaller vessels poured from openings that appeared across its hull. Each one was roughly the size of an Alliance fighter, but their design was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The ships seemed to phase between solid matter and energy, their hulls shifting and changing as they moved. "Admiral, the diplomatic shuttle is not responding," reported the fleet communications officer on the main screen. Jake watched in horror as the small diplomatic vessel simply vanished. One moment it was there, the next it had been absorbed into one of the alien fighters. The enemy ship glowed brighter for a moment, as if digesting what it had consumed. "All ships, open fire!" Admiral Harris's voice boomed across the fleet channels. The Alliance fleet unleashed everything they had. Kinetic railguns fired streams of metal at incredible speeds. Energy weapons painted space with brilliant colors. The Stoneblood's gravity cannons created visible distortions in space-time. Venom Wraith vessels launched clouds of corrosive torpedoes that could eat through any known material. For a brief moment, it looked like they were winning. The Harbinger's hull cracked under the assault, bleeding that strange glowing fluid into space. Sections of its armor peeled away, revealing the organic machinery beneath. Then everything changed. The damaged areas of the Harbinger's hull began to shift and flow like liquid metal. Within minutes, the cracks had sealed themselves. Worse, the repaired sections now seemed resistant to the weapons that had damaged them. Kinetic rounds bounced off areas that had been vulnerable moments before. Energy beams were absorbed harmlessly by hull sections that now glowed with the same frequency as the attacking weapons. "It's adapting," Dr. Amy Foster whispered. "It's learning from our attacks." The alien fighters swarmed toward the Alliance fleet. Jake watched his tactical display as red dots representing enemy vessels closed in on the blue dots of Alliance ships. The first contact was devastating. An Alliance cruiser fired its main guns at an approaching fighter. The alien vessel absorbed the energy beam and immediately began glowing with the same color. When it fired back, it used a perfect copy of the Alliance weapon, but somehow more powerful. "Captain, we're receiving a boarding signal from Commander Sullivan," reported Sam. "She's leading a strike team to one of those fighters that got disabled. Patch me through to her team." Beth's voice came through the speakers, tight with concentration. "We're inside the alien vessel. Jake, this thing isn't just a ship. The walls are alive. They're watching us. Can you gather any intelligence?" We're trying, but this place is like a nightmare. The corridors pulse like blood vessels and the floor feels warm under our feet. Wait, there's something ahead. The communication filled with static for several moments. When Beth's voice returned, it was strained with fear. Jake, we need immediate extraction. This ship isn't just alive, it's hungry. It's trying to absorb us. The walls are reaching out, trying to pull us in. We barely made it back to our entry point. Get out of there now. Jake watched helplessly as Beth's shuttle launched from the alien fighter just as the vessel's hull began to glow. The enemy ship had learned something from the brief contact with Alliance personnel. The battle raged for hours. The Alliance fleet threw everything they had at the Harbinger and its swarm of fighters. For every small victory, the enemy adapted and came back stronger. Ships that had been effective against certain fighters found their weapons useless in the next encounter. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically at her station, analyzing the battle data. Captain, I'm seeing a pattern. The Harbinger isn't just copying our weapons. It's studying our tactics, our ship designs, even our biological signatures. Each engagement makes it more dangerous. Jake looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink. The Alliance fleet had started with 300 ships. Now barely half remained operational. The Harbinger showed no signs of serious damage, and its fighters were becoming more effective with each passing hour. All ships, this is Admiral Harris. We're falling back to defensive position Gamma. Repeat, all ships fall back. As the Alliance fleet retreated, Jake watched the Harbinger's smaller vessels return to their mothership. The massive alien vessel pulsed brighter than before, as if feeding on the knowledge it had gained from the battle. Sam, send a priority message to Alliance Command, Jake ordered. Tell them we've engaged the Harbinger. Tell them we're dealing with something that learns from every encounter. And tell them we're going to need a miracle to stop this thing. The Valiant joined the retreat with the rest of the battered Alliance fleet. Behind them, the Harbinger began moving again, continuing its steady course toward the heart of Alliance space. It had learned much from this first battle, and Jake knew with terrible certainty that their next encounter would be even more difficult. The enemy was no longer unknown. It was something far worse, an opponent that grew stronger from every defeat it inflicted. The Deathworld Alliance Part 3, the price of survival. Fort Defiance had never seemed so small. The massive human outpost, built into an asteroid field at the edge of Alliance space, now housed the survivors of the greatest military defeat in galactic history. Jake Morrison walked through corridors packed with wounded soldiers and damaged equipment, the weight of his new rank heavy on his shoulders. Admiral Lisa Carter had promoted him to Alliance battle commander after Fleet Admiral Rex Harris died. During the retreat from Nexus Point, Jake still couldn't believe the grizzled veteran was gone, vaporized along with his flagship when the Harbinger's adaptive weapons finally learned to penetrate Stormbreaker's shields. Captain Morrison, the War Council is ready for you, announced Lieutenant Sam Parker. Even her usually steady voice showed strain. The communications specialist had worked around the clock coordinating evacuation efforts across Alliance space. Jake nodded and made his way to the main briefing room. The space that once held celebration dinners now served as a desperate command center. The surviving Alliance leaders sat around a holographic display showing their remaining forces. The numbers were grim. General P. Collins, leader of Human Ground Forces, looked up as Jake entered. The tough soldier had fought on a dozen Deathworlds, but the lines around his eyes showed the stress of knowing that conventional military thinking was useless against their enemy. Jake, we've lost contact with 3 more systems, Pete reported. The Harbinger is moving through our space like a plague. Every world it visits goes silent within hours. Commander Beth Sullivan stood beside a tactical display, her face pale, but determined. Our scouts report the same pattern everywhere. The Harbinger arrives, studies the planet for a few hours, then deploys those smaller vessels. Within a day, there's nothing left but empty cities and stripped landscapes. What about evacuation efforts? Jake asked. We're moving people as fast as we can, replied Sergeant Kate Murphy from her position at the communications array. But the Harbinger is faster than our transport ships. For every 10 worlds we evacuate, it hits 15 more. Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her research station, surrounded by data screens and alien tissue samples. Dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept in days. I've been analyzing the remains of the alien fighters we destroyed. Jake, this thing isn't just a ship or even a species. It's something else entirely. What do you mean? Amy activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of one of the alien vessels. Look at this. The hull isn't built, it's grown. These ships are alive, but not in any way we understand life. They're like organs in a larger body, with the Harbinger as the brain. Jake studied the display. The organic patterns reminded him of human blood vessels, but twisted into impossible geometric shapes. How do we fight something like that? That's what we've been trying to figure out, said Professor Zix, the insectoid scientist from the radiation-blasted world of Atomfall. His translated voice buzzed with frustration. My people have run computer simulations for 47 hours. Every scenario ends the same way. The Harbinger adapts to our weapons faster than we can develop new ones. Jake felt a familiar weight of impossible odds settling on his shoulders. It was the same feeling he'd had during the siege of Europa Station, when enemy forces had outnumbered them 50-1, but this was worse. They weren't just outnumbered, they were outmatched by an enemy that learned from every encounter. There has to be something, Jake insisted. Every system has a weakness. Dr. Amy Foster activated another display. Actually, there might be. Professor Zixk and I discovered something interesting in the battle data. Watch this. The hologram showed sensor readings from the battle at Nexus Point. Amy highlighted specific moments when Alliance weapons had damaged the Harbinger. See here? Every time we heard it, the damage spreads in a specific pattern. It's not random. The energy flows through the ship like information moving through a computer network. Professor Zix's mandibles clicked excitedly. We believe the Harbinger has a central processing core. One location where all its learning and adaptation is coordinated. If we could damage or destroy that core, the whole ship might become vulnerable, Jake finished. But how do we reach it? Beth Sullivan stepped forward. It would require someone to get inside the Harbinger and fight their way to the core. Based on what my boarding team saw, that's basically a suicide mission. The internal defenses are unlike anything we've encountered, added Sergeant Kate Murphy. Living walls that try to absorb you, acid pools, and those biomechanical guardians. Plus, anyone who goes in risks being absorbed by the ship and having their knowledge added to its collective intelligence. Jake looked around the room at the faces of his friends and fellow warriors. Each one had survived impossible odds on their homeworlds. They had faced death before, but this was different. This was asking someone to walk into hell with no chance of coming back. I'll go, Jake said quietly. Absolutely not, Beth responded immediately. The Alliance needs you to coordinate. The defense. The Alliance needs someone to stop that thing before it consumes every world we've sworn to protect. Lieutenant Sam Parker looked up from her communication station. Captain, I'm intercepting a strange transmission. It's coming from the Harbinger. Put it on speakers. The room filled with alien sounds that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the mind. After a moment, the computer provided a translation. Resistance causes inefficiency. Your species shows potential for integration. Surrender will result in preservation of core personality matrices. Continued resistance will result in forced harvesting of biological and technological resources. The transmission ended, leaving the room in silence. It's offering us a deal, Amy whispered. Surrender and be absorbed willingly, or fight and be consumed anyway. Jake stood up. Then we give it a third option. We hurt it so badly that it thinks twice before threatening anyone else again. Jake, even if we could reach the core, we don't have enough ships left to provide adequate distraction, Pete Collins pointed out. The Harbinger would detect any infiltration attempt. Not if we use the prototype stealth ship, Beth suggested. The one the tech teams have been working on. It combines human cloaking technology with Alliance materials. Amy nodded. The stealth field might confuse the Harbinger's sensors long enough for a small team to get inside. Jake looked at the tactical display showing their remaining forces. Less than 100 ships scattered across a dozen systems. It wasn't much, but it was what they had. "Here's what we're going to do," Jake announced. "I'll take a small volunteer team into the Harbinger using the stealth ship. The rest of our fleet will engage the entity in a direct assault to draw its attention." "Who's going to lead the distraction force?" asked Pete. Captain Dan Brooks stepped forward from where he'd been quietly listening. The veteran pilot had lost his ship at Nexus Point but managed to escape in a rescue pod. "I'll take command of the assault fleet. My crew and I have a score to settle with that thing," Jake nodded gratefully. Don was one of the best tactical commanders in the Alliance. If anyone could keep the Harbinger busy, it was him. "I'll need volunteers for the infiltration team," Jake continued. "I won't lie to you. This is a one-way mission. We're going into that thing with no guarantee we can get out again." Beth Sullivan stepped forward without hesitation. "I'm with you." Sergeant Kate Murphy joined her. "Someone needs to watch your back." Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her research. "You'll need someone who understands alien biology. I'm coming too." One by one, warriors from across the Alliance volunteered. A Stoneblood named Granite Fist, whose people had fought in the deepest caverns of high-gravity worlds. A Venom Wraith called Toxic-Wind, whose acidic touch could dissolve most known materials. Even Professor Zixk volunteered despite his lack of combat experience. Jake felt a mixture of pride and sadness as he looked at his volunteer team. These beings had already given everything to protect their worlds. Now they were preparing to give their lives. "The stealth ship will be ready in 6 hours, reported Tony Rodriguez over the communication system. "I'm installing every piece of Alliance technology we have." "She get you there, Captain." "All right, people. Let's get to work." "Don, I want your fleet ready to engage the Harbinger as soon as we launch. Make it angry, make it focus on you, and give us time to reach that core." As the meeting broke up, Jake stayed behind to study the tactical displays. Somewhere out there, the Harbinger continued its steady advance toward the heart of Alliance space. In a few hours, he would be inside that living nightmare, fighting his way toward an enemy that had consumed countless civilizations. But for the first time since the battle at Nexus Point, Jake felt something other than despair. He felt purpose. Win or lose, the Alliance would make its stand. And if they were going to die, they would die fighting. The Deathworld Alliance Part 4. Into the heart of darkness, the stealth ship Phantom cut through space like a knife through silk, its advanced cloaking field bending light and sensor waves around its hull. Jake Morrison sat in the pilot's seat, watching the Harbinger grow larger on his screen. Even from 50 kilometers away, the massive alien vessel dominated his view, its organic surface pulsing with veins of sickly light. "Distraction fleet is engaging the target," reported Lieutenant Sam Parker from the communications station. Her voice was tight with concentration as she monitored multiple channels at once through the viewport. Jake could see the brilliant flashes of weapons fire as Captain Dan Brooks led the remaining Alliance fleet in a desperate assault. The attack looked pitiful against the Harbinger's enormous bulk, like insects attacking a giant, but it was working. The alien vessel's attention focused on the fleet, its smaller fighters swarming out to meet the threat. "Hull breach charges are ready," announced Sergeant Kate Murphy from the weapons station. The tough soldier had modified their cutting tools with Alliance technology, creating devices that could penetrate almost any known material. Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her scanner readings. "I'm detecting massive energy flows throughout the ship. The core is definitely in the center, but we'll have to fight through layers of defenses to reach it." Commander Beth Sullivan checked her assault rifle one final time. "Remember, once we're inside, we split into 3 teams. Speed is everything. The longer we stay in there, the more chance that thing has to adapt to our presence." Jake guided the Phantom toward a section of the Harbinger's hull that seemed less active than the rest. The stealth field held as they approached, but he could feel sweat beading on his forehead. If the cloaking failed now, they would be vaporized before they could even attempt their mission. "Contact with the hull in 30 seconds, Jake announced. Professor. Zix's translated voice buzzed with nervous energy. My analysis suggests we aim for the junction points between the organic sections. The hull should be thinner there. The Phantom touched down on the Harbinger's surface with barely a whisper. Through the deck plating, Jake could feel the alien ship's pulse, a rhythm that seemed to match no known heartbeat. It was like standing on the back of some impossible living creature. Hull breach in progress, reported Kate as she activated the cutting charges. The tools sliced through the Harbinger's outer skin like a hot knife through butter. Strange, glowing fluid leaked from the cut edges, and Jake could swear he heard something that sounded almost like a scream echoing through the alien vessel's structure. We're through, Beth announced. The opening is stable. Jake looked around at his team one final time. Granite Fist, the massive Stoneblood warrior, flexed his rock-like fingers. Toxiquine, the Venom Wraith scout, checked the seals on his environmental suit. Professor Zix clutched his scanner with all four of his insectoid arms. Each of them knew they might not see the others again. Remember the plan? Jake said. Beth, take Granite Fist and head for the lower power conduits. Amy, you and Toxiquine follow the upper neural pathways. Professor Zix and I will take Kate through the central corridor toward the core. If anyone finds the target first, signal the others. They dropped through the breach into the Harbinger's interior, and Jake immediately understood why Beth's first boarding team had been so shaken. The corridors weren't built, they were grown. The walls pulsed with organic rhythms, and the floor felt warm and slightly soft under their feet. Worse, the surfaces seemed to watch them, with patches that looked disturbingly like eyes tracking their movement. This way, Jake whispered, following his scanner's readings toward the ship's center. The three teams split up at the first major junction. Jake watched Beth and Granite Fist disappear down a corridor that curved away like the inside of some massive artery. Amy and Toxiquine headed up a passage that seemed to twist in directions that hurt to look at directly. Jake led Kate and Professor Zix down the central passage. The corridor was wider than the others, but somehow more threatening. The walls here were covered in what looked like nerve clusters, pulsing nodes that glowed brighter as they approached. Captain, I'm receiving transmissions, Professor Zix reported, his scanner buzzing with activity. The ship is communicating with itself, sharing information about our presence. How long before it adapts to counter us? Jake asked. Unknown. But the information flow is increasing rapidly. Kate's voice came through the communication system from Beth's team. We've found something down here. It's like a graveyard of spaceships, but they're all partially dissolved. I can see technology from dozens of different civilizations, Amy's voice followed from the upper passage. The neural pathways up here are horrifying. I'm detecting consciousness? Patterns, but they're fragmented and twisted. I think the Harbinger keeps parts of the minds it absorbs, using them as processing units. Jake felt his stomach turn. The Harbinger wasn't just destroying civilizations, it was enslaving them, forcing their consciousness to serve its alien purposes for eternity. Keep moving, Jake ordered. We end this nightmare today. They pressed deeper into the ship's interior. The passages grew stranger the further they went, with walls that seemed to shift when Jake wasn't looking directly at them. Professor Zix. Scanner readings became increasingly erratic, as if the ship's interior existed in more dimensions than human senses could perceive. Core chamber ahead, Jake announced as his scanner detected a massive open space. They emerged into a spherical room that defied understanding. The chamber was easily a kilometer across, with the walls covered in pulsing organic patterns that hurt to look at directly. In the center, suspended in a web of bioelectric conduits, hung a brain-like structure the size of a building, but they weren't alone. Figures moved in the shadows around the core, and as Jake's eyes adjusted, he realized they were facing the absorbed personalities of previous victims. Beings from a dozen different species, their bodies half organic and half mechanical, moved with jerky, unnatural motions as they guarded the central intelligence. So you have come to face me directly, a voice spoke in Jake's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. The core entity pulsed brighter as it communicated. Your species shows remarkable determination, but ultimately futile resistance to the natural order. There's nothing natural about consuming entire civilizations, Jake replied, raising his weapon. Consumption is survival, adaptation is evolution. Your species possesses qualities that would be valuable additions to my collective consciousness. Join willingly, and I will preserve your individual personality within my greater mind. Resist, and I will take what I need by force. The absorbed guardians began moving toward Jake's team. Kate opened fire with her modified weapons, but the energy beams seemed to have little effect on the biomechanical beings. Jake, we need to reach that core now, Professor Zixk urged, his scanner showing massive energy buildups throughout the chamber. Outside the ship, Captain Don Brooks' voice crackled over the communication channels. Jake, whatever you're doing in there, do it fast. This thing is adapting to our weapons faster than ever. We can't hold its attention much longer. Amy, Beth, report, Jake called into his communicator. We're fighting our way toward your position, Beth responded, the sound of weapons fire audible. In the background, these corridors are trying to trap us, but Granite Fist is punching through the walls. I've found something important, Amy's voice was strained with effort. The neural pathways contain fragments of every civilization this thing has absorbed. They're still conscious, still fighting against their imprisonment. If I can boost their signal, they might be able to disrupt the core's control. Jake looked at the massive brain suspended before him, then at the advancing guardians. The absorbed beings moved with the coordination of a hive mind, but in their eyes, Jake could see traces of their original personalities still struggling against their captivity. Do it, Amy, Jake ordered. Boost that signal and give these prisoners a chance to fight back. Professor, can you find the core's weak point? Jake asked as he and Kate fell back from the advancing guardians. Analyzing, Zixk replied, his scanner working frantically. The bioelectric matrix has several critical junction points, but reaching them would require someone to physically interface with the core's defense grid. Jake understood what that meant. Someone would have to get close enough to touch the core itself, risking immediate absorption by the alien intelligence. I'll do it, Kate said, reloading her weapon. You coordinate the others? No, Jake replied. Firmly, this is my responsibility. Before either of them could argue further, Amy's voice echoed through the chamber and their communicators simultaneously. Signal boost initiated. You should see some confusion in the Guardians now. The absorbed beings suddenly stopped their coordinated advance, clutching their heads as conflicting signals tore through their modified minds. For the first time since entering the ship, Jake felt a glimmer of hope. Now's our chance, he told his team. Let's end this nightmare once and for all. The core entity's mental voice filled with something that might have been fear as the absorbed personalities of countless civilizations began to rebel against their captor, and Jake Morrison, prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to free them all. The Deathworld Alliance Part 5, Earth's Last Stand, the Harbingers. Core chamber erupted in chaos as the absorbed personalities of countless civilizations fought against their captor's control. Jake Morrison watched the biomechanical guardians stumble and crash into each other, their movements no longer coordinated by the central intelligence. For the first time since entering this nightmare, he had a clear path to the massive brain structure floating in the center of the chamber. The rebellion is spreading throughout the ship, reported Dr. Amy Foster over the communication system. But I don't know how long it will last. The core is trying to reassert control. Jake, the ship is changing course, Captain Dan Brooks' voice crackled through from outside. It's heading directly for Earth maximum speed. Jake felt ice form in his stomach. The Harbinger was making a desperate run for humanity's homeworld, planning to absorb Earth's billions of people to restore its damaged collective consciousness. How long until it reaches Earth? Jake asked. At this speed, maybe 6 hours, Don replied. Our fleet is trying to slow it down, but we're barely scratching the surface. Professor Zix's scanner chirped urgently. Captain, the bioelectric matrix is destabilizing. If we're going to act, it must be now, before the core regains full control. Commander Beth Sullivan's voice came through the communicator. We're fighting our way to your position, but these corridors keep trying to reform and block us. Granite Fist is literally punching holes through the walls. Jake looked at Sergeant Kate Murphy, who was keeping watch for any Guardians that might recover from the neural disruption. Her face was grim but determined. What do you need me to do, Captain? Someone has to physically interface with the core's bioelectric matrix, Jake explained. Touch those junction points Professor Zixk identified and overload the entire system. Suicide, Kate said flatly. Whoever does that will be absorbed by the core before they can complete the overload. Maybe, but if we don't try, Earth dies along with every other world in Alliance space. Then the massive brain structure pulsed brighter. And Jake could feel the alien intelligence trying to force its way back into his mind. The voice that had spoken to him before returned, but now it carried notes of desperation. Your resistance has caused significant damage to my collective consciousness, the entity said. But you cannot destroy what has survived for millions of years. I offer you one final opportunity. Surrender now, and I will preserve your homeworld as a breeding ground for future generations. Go to hell, Jake replied, around the chamber. The absorbed Guardians began to move again as the core slowly regained control over their minds. But now Jake could see something different in their eyes. The rebellion Amy had started was still fighting, creating cracks in the entity's mental dominance. Amy, can you boost the signal again? Jake called. I'm trying, but the neural pathways are adapting to my interference. Each boost is less effective than the last. Jake made his decision. He checked his assault rifle one final time and started moving toward the core. The bioelectric matrix was 20 meters away, suspended in a web of organic conduits that pulsed with alien energy. Jake, no! Kate shouted, but he was already running. The absorbed Guardians turned toward him, their biomechanical bodies moving with renewed coordination. Jake fired as he ran, his modified Alliance weapons cutting down the first wave of defenders. But more kept coming, emerging from alcoves around the chamber walls. I'm going with you, Kate announced, following behind him with her own weapon. Blazing! Damn it, Kate, this is a one-way trip. Then we go together. They fought their way across the chamber floor, stepping over the remains of Guardians that fell to their weapons. But for every one they destroyed, 2 more took its place. Jake's ammunition counter showed dangerously low levels. Captain, I've reached the lower power conduits. Beth's voice came through the communicator. Granite Fist is tearing them apart, but the ship is regenerating the damage almost as fast as we can cause it. Keep trying, every bit of damage helps. Jake reached the base of the core's suspension web. Up close, the bioelectric matrix was even more disturbing than it had appeared from across the chamber. The junction points Professor Zixk had identified looked like massive nerve clusters, each one pulsing with the stolen thoughts and memories of absorbed civilizations. The overload sequence requires simultaneous contact with at least 3 junction points. Professor Zixk's voice buzzed urgently. And the contact must be maintained for approximately 30 seconds to cascade through the entire matrix. Jake looked at the positioning of the nerve clusters. They were spread too far apart for one person to reach them all. He would need help. Kate, can you reach that junction point on the left? She nodded grimly. What about the third one? Before Jake could answer, Commander Beth Sullivan's voice echoed through the chamber. We're here. Beth and Granite Fist burst through a wall of organic material, the massive Stoneblood warrior using his rock-like fist to clear a path. Behind them came Dr. Amy Foster and Toxiquind, the Venom Wraith Scout dissolving obstacles with his acidic touch, the third junction point, Jake pointed. Amy, can you reach it? Yes, but Jake, if we do this, we're not walking out of here, I know. The core entity's mental voice roared through their minds with fury and desperation. You do not understand. What you are destroying, I am the preserver of civilizations. Without me, their knowledge dies forever. Their knowledge belongs to them, not to you. Jake replied. Around the chamber, the absorbed Guardians made one final coordinated rush toward the core. But the rebellion Amy had started was spreading faster now, and many of the biomechanical Beings turned on each other as conflicting loyalties tore through their modified minds. "Now!" Jake shouted. He pressed his hands against the nerve cluster in front of him, feeling electricity course through his body as the alien matrix tried to absorb his consciousness. Beside him, Kate made contact with her junction point, screaming as bioelectric energy flooded through her nervous system. On the far side, Amy pressed against the third cluster, her face contorting in pain as the core tried to pull her mind into its collective. The bioelectric matrix began to overload. Cascading failures spread through the web of conduits as the stolen energy of countless civilizations turned against their captor. The massive brain structure convulsed, its surface cracking as feedback loops tore through its organic circuits. "The absorbed personalities are breaking free," Amy gasped, her voice barely audible over the increasing electrical discharge. "I can hear them. They're saying goodbye. Jake felt his own consciousness being pulled toward the core, but instead of absorption, he sensed something else. The freed minds of absorbed civilizations were reaching out, not to capture him, but to help him complete the overload sequence. Thousands of voices spoke as one, sharing their knowledge of the entity's weaknesses. Outside the ship, Captain Dan Brooks watched in amazement as the Harbinger suddenly stopped its advance toward Earth. The massive vessel convulsed, its organic hull cracking and bleeding that strange luminous fluid into space. "All ships, concentrate fire on the damaged sections," Don ordered. "Whatever Jake's team is doing, it's working." Inside the core chamber, the overload reached critical levels. The bioelectric matrix exploded in a cascade of energy that tore through the Harbinger's entire structure. Jake felt his consciousness scattering across the ship's dying nervous system. But in that moment of dissolution, he experienced something incredible. The absorbed personalities of every civilization the Harbinger had consumed were finally breaking free. Millions of minds, preserved for eons in digital slavery, used their final moments of existence to ensure the entity could never regenerate or adapt. To survive this destruction, Kate Murphy fell beside him, her body unable to withstand the electrical overload. Dr. Amy Foster collapsed at her junction point, but managed to smile as she watched the core's surface cracking apart. "We did it," she whispered. The Harbinger died from the inside out. Its massive hull split open, releasing clouds of organic debris and the freed energy of countless civilizations. The smaller fighter vessels fell silent as their connection to the Central Intelligence was severed forever. Captain Dan Brooks led the Alliance fleet in a final bombardment, ensuring that nothing remained of the entity that had threatened to consume their galaxy. As the last pieces of the Harbinger drifted apart, he received weak signals from the escape pods that had ejected from the dying ship. "This is Commander Sullivan." Beth's voice was barely audible. "We're alive, but barely. Jake and Kate ... they didn't make it out." 3 days later, Admiral Lisa Carter stood before a memorial wall at Fort Defiance, watching as new names were added to the list of Alliance heroes. Jake Morrison and Kate Murphy joined the thousands of others who had given their lives to protect the galaxy from threats beyond imagination. "They saved us all," General Pete Collins said quietly as he joined Lisa at the memorial. "The entire galaxy owes them a debt we can never repay." Lisa nodded, watching through the viewports as new ships arrived at the station. Alliance fleets were being rebuilt, stronger than before thanks to the knowledge gained from their victory over